Okay, so for today's video, I want to do a very quick one about what happens when the gates open by mistake. So this is really a very quick video about my opinions, and it is only my opinion, on Britain's prison release crisis. The latest in a long series of crises that the UK faces, and who would have thought this would be one of them? You would rightfully expect that if somebody is serving a custodial sentence, a prison sentence, that all the checks are done meticulously, that the system works impeccably, and that they serve their time definitely. But right now in Britain, that expectation is not only failing, it's nosediving. Mistakes are being made on a massive level. Dangerous offenders, system errors, police manhunts, public finding them. So today I want to pull back the curtain on a growing, emerging crisis in the UK prison system. The mass of accidental, shall we call them, releases, the pressures behind them, and what this means for public safety and also the rule of law, and most importantly, accountability. So here's a stark fact. And I know there's been a bit of press recently in the last 2 weeks, particularly about accidental releases. But between April 2024 and as recently as March 2025, so forget the last 2 weeks, but that 1 year period, 262 prisoners in England and Wales were released in error. So that's more than double the 115 that got accidentally released the previous year. That's a scary statistic. Now, obviously, not all of these are crazy criminals. Some of these are going to be people that perhaps didn't pay their council tax, or people that have been done for fraud, not particularly dangerous, still criminals, but not a threat to society on the whole. But let's face it, a portion of these are kiddie botherers, offenders of the genital persuasion, foreigners awaiting deportation, and so on and so on. And some of these are actually still missing. That's even scarier. So the question now becomes, how does a prison system that's meant to lock down, protect, and also administer and deliver justice end up accidentally freeing the people that it shouldn't? And also, what the hell does this say about the state of Britain's justice system in 2025? Here's looking at you, David Lammy. So let's start with the numbers. So the HMPPS, basically their report shows that the number of mistakenly released prisoners jumped to 262 for the 12 months ending March 2025. That was an increase of 128% on the previous year. Now, what counts as being released in error? Well, basically, it means, in a nutshell, that someone's been discharged from prison or from court incorrectly. It might be the wrong person, the wrong date, the wrong classification, wrong sentence, whatever it was. One high-profile case was Brahim Kadur Sharif. He was a 24-year-old Algerian national and a convicted offender. He was accidentally released from Wandsworth literally last week, 29th of October. Another one, William Smith, Billy Smith, a 35-year-old fraudster, released in error and then actually surrendered himself, handed himself back in a few days later. And believe me when I tell you, I've seen the video of this. There's a video of him walking up to the prison, stopping a prison guard outside who's just casually walking past. And he says something like, how do I get myself back into prison? They point to a door and tell him to go to the door, and then they just walk off. And then he walks in. A few minutes later, he actually walks back out, and he's just outside having a cigarette. And then he walks back in, and then lo and behold, for a third time, he walks back out before two guards come out, and then he's escorted back in. Now, that's mental. There's even reporting of additional prisoners still at large after being released in error. So this is above and beyond the 262 from that year. Basically, that number may be wrong. There may have been a few more. That's what they're saying. So the scale of this is ridiculous, and it's very real. the problem isn't isolated. It's not just Wandsworth. So let's get into why this is happening. And one key factor, one undeniable factor, is the rush to reduce overcrowding. So the prison's population has risen dramatically. Resources are stretched. The system is under pressure. For example, the early release scheme that was introduced in September 2024 lowered the proportion of a sentence that some prisoners must serve, depending on their conviction, from 50% to 40%. So basically, they get 20% off. And this is to free up space. So that sudden change created complexity. Old classifications of offences, changes to law, paper records that are still in use when everything's gone digital, mismatches in data systems. So basically the prison and parole service, they say themselves that some of the increase is linked to those legislation changes. Another factor is operational failure. The Prison Governors Association described the accidental releases as a significant operational failure and pointed to the lack of a silver bullet when it comes to improvement. So, in short, what they're saying is they've got outdated systems, they've got understaffing, they've got a complexity of law changes that they can't get their heads around, they've got overwhelmed institutions. And because the system is meant to be really tight, even a small percentage of errors still translates to hundreds of people being let out by mistake. The government are basically too tight to build new prisons, so legislation's been pushed through to reduce the sentences that people serve for their crime. Now, that in itself seems ridiculous. Build new prisons, you morons. So when you've got serious criminals and kiddie botherers that are released in error, this erodes trust. The public fully expects the system to keep people behind bars, which they've every right to. You take the case of the Algerian offender I mentioned earlier. Police had to launch a manhunt, and then the mistake became a headline, and it wasn't reported immediately. Don't forget that. Secondly, you've got trust in the system, in the justice system, in the prison system. If people believe that the system is sloppy, inconsistent, or even just broken, it undermines legitimacy. That feeds into cynicism and resentment from the public. And third, you've got accountability and also cost. Mistakes like this, they cost money to fix, they cost time, they cost reputation, they distract from reforms elsewhere. And then you've got the justice of it all. Some people that are released in error, they may still be returned to custody, but the damage may be already done. What if they revisit a victim or they create more victims while they're out before they're captured? The amount of anxiety that a victim would feel if somebody that had perpetrated a crime against them had accidentally been released. Oh, my days. And that could make entire communities anxious, as well as individuals. And the damage is irreparable. So the system's promise of order, it all gets chipped away at, it all gets eroded. So what's being done? What's being done to fix this? And also what needs to happen? Well, the government I say the government, Keir Starmer has acknowledged the issue, that it shouldn't have happened. The Justice Secretary, David Lammy, has gone on record a couple of times now saying that he's been appalled and pledged action. But bollocks, what action? You need to take immediate steps. You need to update release checks immediately. There needs to be send a bloody email. I mean, come on, man. You need to bring in tech and data improvements because many of these checks and releases, they actually still rely on paper. And the solutions to this, they're not terribly difficult to work out. Prisons are underfunded, records are archaic, laws are constantly shifting, and staff are overstretched. So you need to fund the prisons, you need to digitize the records, for God's sake, you need to pick a law and stick to it, and then you need to hire more staff. There you go, I've just solved your prison problem. I mean, the PGA has warned that achieving zero errors would demand substantial investment, but isn't that the point? There should be no errors before somebody gets released, rather than having one person check that credibility of that release. Send it through three people. Don't release somebody until it's been, checked. It's ridiculous to think that that doesn't happen anyway. In the long term, you'll need more modern IT systems. You'll need better data linking for things like justice and immigration services. And God knows we need that right now. You need more staff. You need clearer legislation frameworks, and you need audits. And at the end of it all, you need accountability. Until then, the risk of early release by mistake is absolutely going to remain. So here's my takeaway from this. This is my hot take. These accidental releases, they're not just anecdotal blips. They're a symptom of a system that's under pressure, churning through change, and is obviously massively vulnerable to failure. If you're waiting for the justice system to protect you, you're relying on it to keep dangerous people behind bars, then you probably need to pay attention to this, because when the system slips, you're going to feel it. And the simple truth here is that a prison service that can't reliably hold its prisoners is a public safety issue. So yes, reforms matter, resources matter, accountability absolutely matters, because the consequences of getting it wrong are very real. So what are your thoughts on this? What's your opinion on this raft, most recently, of 4 early releases? One of them, he'd been released the same day. So he actually got sent to prison and the same day got let out. I mean, that beggars belief. But I value your opinions. Drop it in the comments, let me know. YouTube is going to put another video there. Like, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, all that jazz. Another video tomorrow. Goldman. Peace out.